The massive citadel floated silently above the swirling gas giant. Its walls gleamed with cold metal and the corridors were bright but empty. Most of the night shifts were automated. Only a few humans walked these halls, doing their work quietly. No one cared about the small chamber deep beneath the palace. No one except the 3 dragon hatchlings inside it. The hatchlings shivered in the corner. Their scales were soft, barely formed, and their tiny wings trembled as they pressed together. Their eyes were wide, glowing faintly in the dim light, filled with fear and loneliness. No one had come for them. No one had fed them. No one had whispered that everything would be all right. A small gust of wind blew through a broken vent, making their sobs echo against the metal walls. Their cries were quiet but sharp, piercing the stillness of the citadel. Outside the chamber, the night continued as normal. Guards passed by, their boots echoing on the polished floors, yet none paused to check the sound. The Empire believed that dragons, even weak ones, should survive or perish on their own. Far above, a human named Elias Rowan finished his cleaning rounds. He was tall and lean, with dark hair falling over his forehead. He was a janitor, unnoticed, moving quietly through the halls. His mop swished across the floor, his steps soft against the echoing corridors. He never thought of himself as special. He never thought his small actions could change anything in the galaxy. But tonight was different. As he worked near the old maintenance vent, he heard a faint sound. A soft, almost broken cry. He paused and listened. His brow furrowed. The sound was strange, not like any machine. Not like the usual alarms or the hum of the engines. It was alive. And small. Curiosity pulled him toward the source. He walked carefully down the side corridors, where the lights flickered and shadows danced. The sound grew louder, more desperate. It was a small, shivering sound full of fear. The closer he got, the more he realized it was not human. His heart quickened, but he did not stop. The chamber door was old and slightly ajar. Elias pushed it gently. Inside he saw them. 3 tiny dragon hatchlings huddled together, shivering and sobbing. One was silver, one blue, and one a pale green. Their scales were still soft, almost like newborn leaves, and their eyes glowed faintly. They were so small, so fragile that a single misstep could hurt them. Elias knelt down slowly, careful not to scare them. He spoke softly, though he knew they might not understand. "It's all right, you're safe." The words felt strange in the cold room, but the hatchlings paused, tilting their heads. They could sense warmth. They could sense care. Their sobs slowed, but their tiny bodies still shook. He took off his coat and wrapped it gently around them. One by one they nuzzled against his chest. The warmth of a human body was new to them. It was soft, steady, comforting. Their cries quieted almost completely and they pressed closer to Elias. He held them tightly but carefully, letting them feel safe. The room was silent except for the soft breathing of the hatchlings. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of their trust. They had been abandoned, left to the cold, ignored by everyone in the Empire. And now, in this small human, they had found someone who stayed. Someone who would not leave. He noticed their tiny wings, almost too weak to move. He gently stroked them with his fingers. He whispered, "You will grow strong. You will not be alone." Though the words were simple, the feeling behind them was deep. The hatchlings curled closer, their small bodies trembling less now. Outside, the citadel's machines hummed as usual. The Empire continued its silent watch over the skies. No one came to check the chamber. No one came to see the miracle happening in the forgotten corner. But Elias did not care. He stayed, holding them, letting the warmth of human care fill the empty space around them. Hours passed, though he did not notice. The hatchlings began to drift into sleep, their tiny breaths soft and even. Their eyes closed, trusting the human who had chosen to hold them. Elias watched them, feeling a strange bond form in the silence. The night was long and the galaxy above continued without attention. But for these 3 small creatures, the world had changed. The first rays of light from the distant gas giant began to touch the chamber walls. Elias finally sat back slightly, careful not to wake them. He smiled softly. For the first time, he realized that even a small human could make a difference. Even one gentle hand could change the course of life. The hatchlings stirred slightly in their sleep, their tiny claws gripping his coat. They did not know the Empire, the stars, or the future. But they knew him. And in that simple knowledge there was trust. There was hope. There was warmth. Elias whispered again, barely moving his lips. "I will not leave you." And in that quiet chamber, forgotten by the galaxy, the 3 dragon hatchlings finally rested, knowing that someone had come for them. The night was no longer empty. The night had a human. The night had hope. And in the shadows, the citadel continued its watch, unaware that life had quietly begun to change below its shining walls. Elias stayed in the small chamber long after the first light touched the walls. The three hatchlings were still asleep, their tiny bodies curled against his chest. Their breathing was soft, almost like a quiet song, and he could feel their fragile hearts beating. He had never felt such responsibility before. It was strange and heavy, but it felt right. He looked around the room. The walls were bare metal, cold and smooth. Pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping small amounts of condensation. The chamber had been forgotten for years. No one cleaned it, no one visited it. But now it felt alive. The hatchling's presence filled it with warmth that no machine or light could give. He gently set the coat-wrapped hatchlings down on a soft patch of cloth in the corner. They stirred slightly, blinking open their glowing eyes. One, the silver hatchling, raised its head and looked directly at Elias. There was a strange intelligence there, a quiet understanding. It chirped softly and Elias smiled. "Don't worry," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." The hatchlings shifted closer to each other, still trembling but less than before. Elias noticed their small wings quivering, weak and unsteady. He reached out and lightly brushed the wings with his fingers, careful not to hurt them. They seemed to respond, curling slightly into his touch. The sound of the crying had drawn attention in ways he did not expect. From the corridor, a faint humming noise of life sign sensors grew louder. The machines detected an unusual pattern: 3 small dragons and a human nearby. Elias didn't know it yet, but the Empire was beginning to notice something strange. He looked at the hatchlings again. Their eyes glimmered with a mix of fear and curiosity. He knelt down to their level, keeping his voice soft and calm. "I won't leave you," he said again. "You're safe now." The blue hatchling made a small noise, almost like a squeak, and shuffled closer. Its tiny head pressed into his hand. Elias laughed quietly, the sound echoing lightly in the empty chamber. He had never expected dragons to respond like this to a human. The Empire had always said that dragons must be strong alone, that humans were insignificant. But here, in this forgotten corner, those rules did not matter. He picked up a small piece of soft cloth from the floor and gently dabbed it near the hatchlings' mouths. He had found some leftover nutrient gel from the storage shelf in the maintenance wing. Hesitant at first, the hatchlings sniffed, then licked it carefully. One by one they began to eat, tiny tongues brushing against his fingers. Elias felt a rush of joy. It was a small thing, feeding them, but it mattered more than anything he had done in his life. Suddenly, a sharp metallic clang echoed from the corridor. Elias froze. He looked up, expecting a guard, but the hallway was empty. Only the machines hummed. He turned back to the hatchlings and they were staring at him with wide eyes, their glowing pupils shining in the dim light. They seemed to sense the danger even if they didn't understand it. Elias realized then that his choice to stop walking down the hallway had changed everything. He could have ignored the cries, followed his usual path, and the hatchlings would have remained alone. But he had stopped. He had listened. And now their trust was in his hands. The green hatchling shifted closer, curling against his arm. Elias held it gently, feeling its tiny heartbeat. He whispered, "We'll get through this. Together." His voice was steady, though his heart raced. The creature's survival depended on him now. He had no training, no orders, no backup, only the simple desire to care for them. As he sat there, he began to notice details he had never seen before. Tiny scales glimmered even in dim light. Little claws flexed slowly. Soft, downy hairs covered their bodies. Each hatchling was unique, with its own small quirks. The silver one tilted its head constantly, curious. The blue one yawned, exposing a tiny row of teeth. The green one trembled but stayed close, seeking warmth. Elias realized that even though they were young and fragile, they were alive, intelligent, and full of potential. Hours passed. The hatchlings began to settle, their small bodies growing calm. Elias stayed with them, speaking softly, letting his presence reassure them. He felt the weight of the world outside the chamber, the Empire, the sky above, the gas giant below. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Only the soft warmth of the hatchlings against him mattered. He noticed that the cries had stopped entirely. The night that had been so full of sobs and fear was now quiet, filled only with soft breathing and gentle movements. Elias realized that sometimes just being there was enough. Sometimes a small act of care could calm the universe, even if only in a small corner. The hatchlings' eyes slowly closed, one after the other. They fell asleep, tiny chests rising and falling. Elias leaned back, keeping his hands nearby, ready to protect them from any sudden danger. The human janitor, unnoticed by the Empire and invisible in the grand halls, had become their guardian. Outside the chamber, life continued. Machines hummed, guards walked, lights flickered, and the stars shone far above the gas giant. But inside the forgotten room, a human and 3 dragon hatchlings shared a quiet miracle. Elias knew nothing would ever be the same again, not for him and not for the hatchlings he had chosen to hold. He whispered one last time, "Sleep now. You are safe." And in that forgotten cold chamber, for the first time since their birth, the hatchlings slept without fear, wrapped in the warmth of a human who had stopped walking. The night had changed. The Empire had not noticed. But for Elias and the dragons, the world had become a place of hope, care, and new beginnings. Elias sat quietly in the small chamber, watching the 3 dragon hatchlings sleep. Their tiny chests rose and fell in soft, steady rhythms, and the warm glow of their eyes dimmed as sleep took hold. For the first time, the chamber felt alive with calm instead of fear. He had never imagined that a human hand could bring such peace to creatures so small, so fragile, and so powerful in the wrong hands. Far above, in the high towers of the citadel, alarms suddenly rang. Life sign sensors had detected unusual readings in the restricted wing. The readings were small, yes, but impossible to ignore. They showed 3 dragons awake and alive, and 1 human in close proximity. Guards and elders rushed to investigate. The Empire had rules. Dragons were sacred, humans were tools, and contact between them was forbidden. Yet here was proof that something extraordinary had occurred. Elias did not hear the alarms at first. He was too focused on the hatchlings, brushing a hand gently over the silver one's soft scales. The tiny creature stirred and blinked at him, then settled back into his lap. His trust was complete. He whispered, "It's all right. I'm here. I'm not leaving." The first guards arrived quietly, weapons drawn but cautious. They peered through the slightly open door and froze. The sight was impossible. A human held the dragons, 3 sacred royal hatchlings, and they were calm, not panicked, not wild. The guards expected fear and chaos, but instead they saw trust. One guard stepped forward, ready to issue orders. "Step away from them," he barked. The hatchlings stirred, their eyes widening, but instead of retreating or attacking, they pressed closer to Elias. He slowly raised his hands, showing he meant no harm. "They are safe," he said. His voice was soft yet firm. "They trust me." The lead guard hesitated. He called for the elders. Soon, the tallest dragon elder arrived, moving quickly through the corridors with robes flowing behind him. He paused at the door, staring at the scene inside. His eyes widened, and for the first time in decades he felt something he could not explain: uncertainty. "Impossible," he whispered. "Dragons do not trust humans." Elias looked up at the elder and bowed slightly, still keeping his hands near the hatchlings. "I did not do anything special," he said quietly. "I only stayed. I only held them. I did not leave." The elder studied the hatchlings. They were calm, breathing evenly, their tiny wings folded gently. Data from the life sign monitors showed their heart rates were stronger, their energy increasing, and their growth potential had improved dramatically in a single night. The elder realized that the human had not only protected them but had enhanced their strength. "Stand back," the elder said to the guards. "Do not touch them." He turned to Elias. How did you?" "I heard them crying," Elias interrupted. "No one came. I just stayed with them. That is all." The elder frowned, unsure whether to scold or praise him. He knew the Empire would not accept this story easily. Humans were considered weak and expendable. Yet here was proof that weakness and strength were not what they thought. The hatchlings had grown stronger in one night, simply because a human had chosen to stay and care. Another guard shifted nervously. "Sir, the sensors, they are recording this. The council will see." The elder waved him silent. "It is too late for rules," he muttered. "The dragons have chosen. They trust this human." Elias glanced at the hatchlings. The silver one blinked at him and chirped softly, curling against his arm. The blue one made a tiny squeak and nudged his chest. Even the green one, who had trembled the most, leaned into him, seeking warmth. Their trust was clear. Their bond with him was undeniable. The elder straightened. "If anyone touches them now, they will not forgive you," he said firmly. "This human stays with them. The Empire will learn from this." Elias shook his head slightly, unsure if he deserved any praise. "I just could not leave," he admitted. "I would not have survived the night if I left them alone." The elder studied him for a long moment. He realized that what the human had done was not just care, it was courage. The kind of quiet courage the Empire had never respected. Yet it was the kind of courage dragons recognized instinctively. Outside the chamber, guards whispered and exchanged glances. They had trained for battle, for strength, for rules. But they had never seen this. 3 dragon hatchlings calm and secure, held by a human who had no power but kindness. Some of the younger guards began to feel a strange hope, a sense that perhaps humans could teach dragons something no machine or warrior ever could. Elias continued to sit on the floor, keeping the hatchlings close. He brushed a finger over the silver one's small head, smoothing its tiny scales. He whispered stories he had never told anyone, stories of the stars, of distant planets, of nights he had walked alone. The hatchlings listened with their glowing eyes, absorbing his voice, absorbing his presence. The elder stepped back and signaled the guards to leave them be. "Let him stay," he said. "The Empire has waited too long. If humans can help the dragons, then we will learn. If we fight this, it will be too late." Elias looked up at him, surprised. "Learn? From me?" "Yes," the elder said. "Even if the Empire does not understand yet, the dragons already do. And it is enough." The hatchlings stirred again, nudging Elias with tiny heads. Their soft sounds filled the chamber, a quiet chorus of life. He smiled, holding them closer. They had survived the night, not because of rules, not because of strength, but because a human had chosen to stay. Outside the chamber, the Empire moved as usual. Machines hummed, corridors were patrolled, lights flickered. But inside the small, forgotten room, history had changed. A human had shown that care, patience, and presence could be stronger than fear, stronger than tradition, stronger than power. And for the first time, the hatchlings knew they were not alone. They had a protector. They had a friend. They had someone who would not walk away no matter what the Empire demanded. The night had ended. The alarm had been silenced. But the bond that had formed in those dark hours would never be broken. The human and the dragons had survived together, and the Empire had noticed too late. Elias had been with the hatchlings for several cycles now. Each day he returned to the small chamber, brushing the soft scales of the silver, blue, and green dragons, feeding them and speaking softly. Over time, the dragons learned to recognize him, their glowing eyes following his movements, their tiny claws curling in anticipation whenever he approached. What had begun as survival had turned into a bond no one in the Empire could have predicted. The chamber was no longer a cold, empty space. Cloths and small objects Elias had gathered created a soft, safe corner where the hatchlings could move freely. He spent hours watching them stretch their wings, wobble as they tried to stand, and even practice small hops across the floor. Each attempt, however clumsy, filled Elias with quiet joy. He whispered encouragements, and the hatchlings chirped back in their small, soft voices. It was not only the hatchlings who were changing. Elias began to see subtle differences in the Empire's approach. Guards and scientists who had first been shocked at the humans' presence now observed from a distance. No one dared enter the chamber without permission, but the curiosity was visible in their cautious glances. They watched as the hatchlings grew stronger, more alert, and more curious, all under Elias's care. The silver hatchling, the most curious of the 3, began to mimic Elias's movements. If he stretched his arms, it stretched its tiny wings. If he whispered softly, it made a soft chirping sound in return. The blue hatchling, initially timid and trembling, began to explore more boldly, climbing small piles of cloth and nudging Elias for attention. The green hatchling, though still cautious, followed their lead, learning to trust not only Elias but the world around it. Elias had never imagined dragons could respond to care in this way. The Empire had long believed that dragons only respected strength and dominance. But here the young dragons were thriving because of patience, attention, and kindness. Elias realized that the bond between a human and dragon was more than friendship, it was teaching the dragon something vital: trust. As the cycles passed, other dragons in the Empire's hatching chambers began to show unusual behaviors. Some started looking for humans when they were alone. Some became calmer in the presence of caretakers, even if they were strangers. The Empire could not ignore the pattern. Humans were not just servants or tools, they were teachers, guides, and protectors. The very rules the Empire had relied on were being rewritten quietly, without rebellion, without war, only through care. One evening, the hatchlings did something Elias did not expect. The silver one, still small but confident, spoke its first word, not in the complex, guttural language of dragons, but in the simple human word it had learned to recognize: Elias. The sound was soft, almost a whisper, but the meaning was clear. The dragon trusted him. The human had become part of its world. Elias felt a wave of emotion. He knelt, holding the hatchling close. "I hear you," he whispered. "I'm here." The other two dragons moved closer, responding to the warmth and safety he provided. That night, the chamber was filled not only with soft glowing eyes and small breathing chests but also with something extraordinary, a silent conversation of trust and understanding between species. The Empire continued to notice from afar. Reports came in of strange growth rates, unusual calmness, and unexpected intelligence in dragon hatchlings. The scientists were baffled. The elders were unsettled. Guards whispered nervously, unsure what to make of the changes. Yet no one could deny what they saw. The dragons under Elias's care were thriving. The human's presence had created a bond stronger than fear, stronger than any machine, stronger than any rule the Empire had established. Elias did not seek recognition. He was not a soldier, not a scholar, not a leader. He was a janitor, simple and unnoticed, yet he held the most extraordinary creatures in the galaxy in his hands every day. And the dragons, small as they were, had given him something equally rare: trust and affection. Over time, the bond grew beyond simple survival. The hatchlings began learning from Elias in ways no one could have predicted. They mirrored his gestures, responded to his tone, and even seemed to anticipate his movements. He taught them small things: how to tilt their heads to listen, how to nuzzle softly, how to move without fear. The dragon's strength increased not just physically but emotionally. They learned patience, calm, and confidence. The elders debated what to do. They could not take the dragons from Elias without risking harm. The hatchlings had bonded deeply with him, and their lives were intertwined now. The Empire had rules, but rules did not dictate loyalty, did not dictate love, did not dictate trust. The Council realized they had underestimated the simplest truth: care was more powerful than control. Elias continued his work, unaware of the debates above. For him, each day was simple: feed the hatchlings, keep them safe, and be present. Yet in those small actions the world was changing. The dragons, who once sobbed in the night and feared being left alone, now grew stronger and braver, learning that a human could be their anchor, their friend, their protector. One night, Elias lay on the floor with the hatchlings resting against him. He looked up at the faint lights above the chamber ceiling and whispered, "We are stronger together." The silver hatchling blinked at him, the blue one curled against his side, and the green one rested its head on his chest. The warmth of the moment was simple, yet it carried a power the Empire could not measure. The Empire had noticed too late, and even then it did not understand. Rules and traditions had failed to predict the strength of this bond. A human and 3 tiny dragons had shown a truth far older than the stars. Trust, care, and presence could be stronger than fear, stronger than control, stronger than any law. And in the quiet chamber, glowing softly with the light of the dragon's eyes, Elias knew something extraordinary. He and the hatchlings were no longer alone. Together they had begun something the galaxy would never forget. Years had passed since Elias first found the sobbing dragon hatchlings. The small chamber that had once been cold and empty was now warm and full of life. The dragons had grown larger, their wings stronger, their scales glimmering in the soft light. But even as they grew in size, the bond they shared with Elias remained unbroken. They followed him everywhere, chirping softly, curling against him, and leaning into his presence whenever they felt unsure. The Empire had changed quietly, without speeches or battles. Observers recorded the dragon's unusual growth and calm behavior, noting that the presence of a human caretaker had transformed them. Guards who once doubted now left the chamber alone, afraid to disturb the delicate balance. Scientists and elders could not explain it fully, but they could not deny it either. The evidence was clear: humans could inspire trust, courage, and strength in dragons in ways that no other force could. Elias continued his simple life. Though he was officially a janitor, he had become known among the dragons as the first and truest caretaker. Titles meant little here. It was the quiet, consistent presence that mattered. Each morning he would wake, make sure the dragons had food, and watch them stretch and practice flying in small, safe spaces within the chamber. He spoke to them softly, teaching them patience, curiosity, and calm. The silver hatchling, now large and confident, had grown into a powerful, elegant dragon. It often perched near the chamber's ceiling watching the skies, but it always returned to Elias. The blue dragon, playful and curious, had learned to carry small objects and return them to Elias, showing a growing intelligence that startled even the elder dragons. The green dragon, still cautious but loyal, had learned the quiet power of observation and patience. Together they had become not only strong but wise. Elias realized that the dragons were not learning just about survival, they were learning about humans. They learned that care and trust were stronger than fear. They learned that presence mattered more than orders. They learned that even a simple human could change the life of another being completely. And in teaching them, Elias himself had changed. He saw more clearly the quiet power of kindness and patience, the value of being present when others abandoned hope. The Empire had recorded everything, but it still struggled to understand. Humans had long been seen as weak and expendable, but now the data spoke a different truth. The dragons under Elias's care were thriving far beyond expectations. They had learned to respond to gentleness, to trust, to bond, and to grow in ways no rulebook could predict. The Empire had underestimated the simplest truth: humans could teach what power alone could not. One quiet night, Elias lay on the floor with the dragons around him. The silver dragon curled its tail near his legs, the blue one rested its head on his chest, and the green one leaned against his side. Above them, the faint lights of the chamber shimmered like distant stars. Elias looked at their glowing eyes and whispered, "You remember me, don't you?" The dragons blinked, soft purrs and tiny chirps answering him. Though they could not speak human words, their trust and recognition were clear. Elias smiled. He realized that what they remembered was more than a name. It was the presence, the care, the quiet attention he had given them when no one else had. The stars above may have been indifferent, the Empire may have been slow to notice, but these dragons remembered. Word of the bond spread quietly across the citadel. Humans assigned to other dragon chambers were allowed, for the first time, to stay longer, observe and interact. Dragon hatchlings no longer sobbed alone in dark rooms. They had caretakers who stayed with them, teaching patience and offering warmth. A simple human's act of presence had rewritten tradition. The galaxy began to notice slowly that humans were not weak, they were remarkable. Elias continued his work without ambition or desire for praise. He only wanted the dragons to be safe, to learn, to grow. He watched them play, tested their courage in small, safe exercises, and encouraged them to explore. The dragons responded, not out of fear or obedience but out of trust. And through this trust, the Empire learned lessons it could not have forced. Strength comes not only from power but from care. Courage comes not only from battle but from presence. Growth comes not only from survival but from love. One day the eldest dragon, now fully grown and majestic, stood before Elias and nuzzled him gently. Its soft purr vibrated through his chest. Elias laughed softly. "You've grown strong," he whispered. "But you've never forgotten." The dragon blinked slowly, glowing faintly, and Elias knew it remembered every night he had held them, every soft word, every gentle touch. As the years passed, the Empire honored the truth quietly. Statues were not built of leaders or generals, but of a human holding a dragon hatchling in a simple embrace. Stories were told of Elias, the janitor who had stayed when no one else would, who had shown the galaxy that care was a form of power. The stars, too, seemed to shine a little brighter above the citadel, recording not battles or conquests but the quiet triumph of presence, trust, and love. Elias grew older, but he remained with the dragons. They flew together, practiced together, and rested together. And though humans around the galaxy still struggled to prove their value, the dragons remembered. They remembered the gentle hand that held them close through the longest night, the voice that whispered courage, the warmth that chased away fear. And in that quiet memory, preserved not by law or history but by life itself, the stars kept a record of humanity's simplest, greatest power. The power to stay, to care, and to make a difference when the world turned its back. The power to change dragons, to change empires, and to be remembered forever. In the chamber, now filled with light, warmth, and gentle sounds, Elias looked at the dragons and whispered, "We did it." The dragons blinked, chirped, and leaned into him. And for a long moment, the universe seemed to pause, holding the quiet truth that humans, through kindness and presence, could be the greatest force among the stars. The stars remembered. The dragons remembered. And through their memory, the Empire learned that humanity's quiet courage would never be forgotten.